All right, I'd like to give it a second. Hey, what's up, bookworms? We are back for another Author's Corner, and this time I am very pleased. A gentleman I have spoken with before and spoken about many a time on this channel, New York Times best-selling author and a very successful showrunner now, Blake Crouch. Blake, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me.
What's up, Mike? Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
I want to open with saying congratulations, Dark Matter success. I had to be very gratifying to you, yes?
It was a really I'm still like processing what I think about it. It was an incredible creative experience making the show, and really a lot more, I think, emotional and challenging having it actually come out into the world than I imagined it would be. And it's just really happy that people showed up for it and seemed to like it, and especially like the best feeling and compliments were that fans of the book felt like I did the story justice, because that would have sucked if they're like, what, we all like to complain when adaptations ruin books that we love. I love to complain about that.
The author I compare you to the most, Michael Crichton, and I think Michael Crichton probably had the best books with like the worst movies adaptations, so yeah, that has to be very, very gratifying to be able to do it yourself and make sure that it stayed, the way that it should have been. That was something that I was really surprised. Last time we spoke, as you were saying, I asked you how faithful is going to be the book. You're like, well, I'm writing it, so it's going to be pretty faithful. But as a book fan, I felt like it was almost like I was watching like a director's cut, because it's like a lot of things that we kind of were curious about. Like we were messaging on Instagram back and forth, like, or we get more things about Amanda and things like that. You're like, yes, we will. I really appreciate that as a book reader. So you've gotten good feedback from other fans of the book.
Oh, I really have. I love that did you describe it as a director's cut of the book?
That's very much so, like an expanded edition or something like that.
Yeah, there was a moment. The book, as you know, and everyone who's read it, that it's a very single player, tight POV of Jason Destin as he goes through the multiverse. Although we tried not to say multiverse since Marvel came in.
Oh, for real?
Everything about multiverse. We try to talk about it a little differently.
Oh, they own the multiverse now, huh?
Okay. Yeah. But one of the things that was always kind of nagging in the back of my mind was there's a whole story there where we're just with Daniela, who's living with this imposter and slowly beginning to suspect that her husband is off in some way. And there was one tiny chapter in the book that touched on it from her POV. It was like 3 pages, but otherwise it's just pure Jason Destin. And that was one of the things I thought I really want to explore, that element of the story. Because when you do TV, it can't all just be one character. You need other storylines to switch to. So that was a really fun and cool kind of reason to do the thing. And of course, hopefully doing a little better justice to Amanda, which a lot of hate mail about that from the book.
Yeah, that was my number one question when I realized that you were expanding some of these roles. And the thing was, I was watching with my wife, who after like the second episode, she was like really tempted to pick up the book. I was like, wait, I want to, because I like watching this with someone who hasn't read it, so I can kind of get that feedback as well. And every time something would happen with Jason 2 or Leighton or something like that, she'd be like, did it happen like this in the book? I'm like, no, none of this happened in the book. It's like, is that a good thing? It's like, yes, we're getting like some expansion on it. And I really did appreciate that. It was really, really cool. So what point in writing this did you say, okay, I want to be able to expand some of these characters? And like I said, it isn't just getting Jason 2's point of view, which really I think that gave that character some layers. But you get bigger parts for Leighton. You added Max, the twin brother, into the story, which was a soul crusher, by the way. And what point did you feel like you had the freedom and you could do that without changing your story?
Wow, it's a great question. So I was walking. So for a little backstory, Dark Matter was originally sold to Sony as a feature film, and I wrote a version of that movie, which was not amazing, and some other writers came in and improved upon it, but it was never really great. It never got above a B. You just lose all the emotional stuff, and we kind of thought the project was dead. And a God bless Sony Pictures, Tom Rothman. They said, you can go ahead and take this to television. And so I was walking through the Denver airport in 2019, and my producer, ℚ𝕦𝕤𝕒𝕤𝕤, called, and he said, I just got a call. We can take this to television. Like immediately my mind starts spinning. And so I went home and I read the book, and I hadn't really just read the book since I had sent in my final revised manuscript, back in 2015. And as I went through the book, and I started kind of flagging where I thought some episode breaks might be. And I saw, it's a 6 episode. If it's a pure, just straight adaptation, it's a 6 episode series. But also I thought, what is the point of doing an adaptation that doesn't bring something new to the table? Like, I think that one of the beautiful things is that if an adaptation can capture the spirit of it and deliver on all the things that the fans are going to want, but also answer some of these questions that I'd been getting from fans for, like, I don't know, since the book had been published. Like, I thought I can actually I didn't think of it in the way that you eloquently said it, but I was thinking along the lines of it's a director's cut. I can expand this out. And it became, so I felt from the beginning that we could take those chances and do some new things. And the big moment of expansion, and you mentioned this Max, the introduction of Max, and that's not an idea of mine. That was an idea of Joel Edgerton's.
No kidding.
Okay. No, we met just before we got greenlit. We met in Hollywood for about 4 days to just do a dark matter summit. There were 4 scripts written, general ideas for what was still to come, and we just talked through everything. And he laid this crazy cool idea on me that it's really interesting because he's not just an actor, he's a writer, a really good writer himself, an incredibly accomplished director. And you get all of those benefits from Joel. And he said, as an actor, it would be a lot more profound if when Jason goes home, he's not going home to this quote unquote perfect life. He's going home to a life that also has pain in it and grief and all the things. All of our lives are multidimensional. It's not just a great thing all the time. And he said, what if there was something under the surface? Maybe a loss. And we started talking, and he came up with this incredible idea that what if there was a twin that was lost? And immediately, like, you sometimes as a writer, you hear ideas and sometimes you're like, I have to think about that. And like the moment it came out of his mouth, I was like, we're doing that. Yeah. It's a home run.
That's good. So, I mean, I had a question for you later. I guess I say now, how great was it to work with not only Joel, but also Jennifer Connelly? I mean, these are 2 actors I followed for years. That had to be just surreal, right?
Very surreal. And it changed the nature of the show and what the show would be. Because I think the show is a much more grounded interpretation of the story, Dark Matter, honestly, than the book is. Because when you get actors of that caliber, it's like suddenly it's like an adult drama, but surrounded by this crazy premise. And so it allows you, because they are such amazing actors and they bring an authenticity and a truth to every scene they do, you get to take this crazy premise and treat it with like absolute stone cold sincerity. And it changed sort of the tone of the show. Because, I mean, you come in with scripts and like, someone, I forget who, but I love this thing. They said a script is just an invitation to play. A script is an incomplete thing. A book is and this is why I love books and will always be a novelist first and foremost. A novel is a full, complete vision of a thing. A script is just like a volley. And then you bring in a director who will have a perspective, and you bring in actors who have their perspectives. And when it works well, everyone brings additive things, and you sort of find what this is supposed to be together. And fortunately, that's what happened on Dark Matter.
Well, there are a couple of questions here I want to touch just before I forget about them, and then we'll get back to the adaptation stuff. I love the book Dracula's. Will there be a sequel? And how was it to work with F. Paul Wilson and other authors?
It was
read this one.
It's bonkers fun and crazy and gory and gross out, and it was maybe the most pure fun I've ever had writing.
All right, say less. I'll check it out.
We each, so it was, do you know Jeff Strand, the horror author?
I do not. I do not.
So it was Jeff Strand, Jay Conrath, me, and F. Paul Wilson. And I think we did this in 2010, and we wrote this 85,000 word horror novel. It's set in the hospital in the town where I live, called Dracula's, and we wrote it in about a month of just blind, like crazy writing. Sometimes our characters would intersect. It's basically it's akin to kind of a monster outbreak in a hospital. And like I wrote the pregnant woman, and F. Paul Wilson writes this gun-toting guy named Clayton Thiel who just steals every scene he's in. And there's a terrible clown named Benny the Clown who does awful things. But they all, I'm not going to pitch the whole book to you, but it was such a beautiful, fun experience. And we also, our email exchanges throughout the process, because we're constantly emailing each other, we were like, this is crazy. We should publish this too. So we also published our email correspondence during the process of writing the book. And the email correspondence is just about as long as the book itself.
Really? Okay. All right. I would say, I thought I had read everything except Famous, and I think Fully Loaded, and some of the short story stuff is just about the only things I haven't really tackled yet. So this isn't a collection?
No, it's its own standalone horror novel.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I mean, totally very different from any of the stuff I'm doing now. It's just four novelists writing a novel together.
It's like Four Rooms.
Yeah, what's that?
Like Four Rooms, the Tarantino collaboration.
Yeah. It was a fun collaborative experience, and just a blast.
Hey, Spencer, thank you. Dropping by real quick to say thanks so much, Blake, for Recursion. The book is amazing. It made me cry, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. And I concur. Fantastic book.
Thank you, Spencer.
And all right, now back to the adaptation stuff real fast. I kind of want to get into the brass tacks. So now you've had two of your properties adapted now, this and Pines, correct?
One other one.
What was the third one?
Good Behavior. It's based on
TNT, wasn't it? Yeah.
What's that?
That was on TNT, I think, right?
It was on TNT.
Yeah.
It's based on a series of novellas I wrote back in the early teens. That's what we're calling them. And it's different. It's not speculative. Like it's not speculative. It's not horror. The hook is just, it's like the character of ℙ𝕦𝕣𝕚𝕤𝕤, who's their heroine / hot mess. It's just, she's like my favorite character I've ever written. And sort of I think the hook of it is her. It's fun. It's like, it's nothing like I've ever done before, but it was kind of funny and dark and noir-y, and it's a lot of fun. It's a good couple watch.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Well, the way I was kind of setting this up here is that poor adaptation, when you're a book reader and then you watch the adaptation later, it seems like you're almost never going to be book's always going to be better. Spoiler there.
Yeah.
But it's very rare when it's the other way around. But poor adaptations seem like it became like the norm for a while. And I've talked to other authors who've had some of their work. Like I remember Jim Butcher telling me what his experience was like with Dresden Files. It was basically like, get out of here, kid. We don't need you. I don't remember how involved you technically were with Pines. I know you did write some episodes.
Yeah.
But were they looking for you for any creative control with that or anything?
It was a really interesting experience, and probably the reason I have a career today in this business. Pines was run a lot more like a film than a TV show, because M. Night Shyamalan exec produced, directed
the whole trilogy in the first season, right?
Well, we did the whole first book in the first season.
Yeah.
So when Fox bought the rights to it, it went very quickly because of Night's involvement into like it was a go show and they were going to make it. And I had only written the first book. I was still writing Wayward, and I was still figuring out how this town worked. Like and so they were like, so how's this town work? I was like, I'm figuring that out myself right now. I have no idea how this town works. So it was a really interesting process of working with Chad Hodge, who created the show.
In the Duffer Brothers, you worked with. Did you have any idea those guys were going to blow up like they did right after that with Stranger Things?
No one did. Yeah. They were sort of brought in on a Hail Mary. The first season had kind of like started to lose its way a little bit, and then I don't know where Night found them, but they came in and just started writing these banger scripts, and then the show came out, and like a year later, Dark Matter's coming out, and Stranger Things season 1 drops, and it was just I mean, they kind of exploded, but
Like, I know those
everyone
names.
everyone sort of called it Wayward Pines University, because I'd never been on a film set before. I think the Duffers, they made a film called, I think it was called maybe Hidden. That it wasn't finished, but it was, in some ways, it was everyone's first big step into like a big thing. And I learned a shit ton. I wasn't like show running it at all. I went to set, I wrote some scripts, I weighed in on things. I saw kind of how the sausage gets made, and it is not always pretty.
Yeah.
But I got a real window into what it is to make these things.
Were you a little starstruck being like around ℙ𝕦𝕬𝕤𝕤𝕤 and people like that? Was it like kind of like, what am I doing here? I'm just like this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to the theater to see The Sixth Sense, and was always such a huge fan of his. I mean, from way back, and it was incredibly surreal. And that's the weird thing about this business is suddenly you are sometimes find yourself thrust into these situations where like all these people who've been doing this forever are trying to make your story for the screen, and they're asking you questions, and they're looking to you for things. It is, it is unbelievably surreal.
All right, well, I don't want to go too much into details. I don't want to get you in trouble with Apple or anything like that. But what you learned on that, did anything go into the negotiation with Apple with being like, okay, I want Final Cut, I want creative control, and they said, hey, you can be the showrunner, you can be the writer? Or was that just kind of how it was offered up initially?
I didn't originally want to be the showrunner. I really hesitated at first. I wanted to write the scripts because I thought I had a really good vision for what the show would be. But I like the show running piece of it. I had seen it on Wayward Pines and Good Behavior, and it is a lot of work, and it is a lot of putting out fires, and you just kind of have to do everything. It's kind of it's literally an impossible job. And so I was like, I'll write the scripts, and let's find a showrunner to like make the trains run on time and stuff. And we started to go down that road, and then I can't remember what the moment was. I think I may have been out to dinner with my wife one night, and she was just like, why don't you just embrace that you're a control freak and go do this thing? Why don't you just go do this thing? You're protesting too hard. And at this time, Sony was like, they were opening the door if I wanted to do it. I was a little nervous because it's not an easy show. Like you could just read the book, and like the challenges are obvious. The multiple Jasons, the multiple Ryans, the huge world building of the multiverse. How do you render the box? How do you render the corridor? It felt unbelievably daunting. But then I think what I came around to was like, someone's gonna fuck this up, and if anyone does, it should be me. I don't want anyone else to do that. It should like live or die with my vision. So I agreed to do it, and kind of started down this, definitely the craziest experience of my life.
Yeah, I feel like people, because they're going to have to dissect your baby, basically, and they're going to go through every single nook and cranny of your book to make it into a screenplay. I would definitely have that. Well, if anyone's going to do this, it should be me. So yeah, I'm glad that you're better. Our better halves do talk some sense into us sometimes.
They do indeed.
Way. A couple of questions here, a couple of messages. Thanks, Slay. I love the book and the show. It was a joy to watch with my dad, who doesn't read books. Our experience watching the show was truly special and unforgettable. Thank you, Mr. Crouch, for these memories.
Thank you, Slay. Thank you. It's so nice. I'm so happy you got to experience that with your father. There's nothing like finding something you love and getting to like share it and watch it with, especially like episodic. I was really annoyed when the show first came out, and
that second episode, my wife's like, "There's only 2."
Yeah, I know. But then as time, then I kind of came around. I was like, it's actually kind of cool that it's one a week. It kind of extends the experience.
The water cooler discussions.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I'm happy. I'm happy you guys had a good time with that. Thank
I
you
am
so
at that point where I love binge culture. I am that type because we'll just when we find the time, we will just knock something out. But with like doing House of Dragon every week, it's really fun to have like a week in between. Like this makes me think back to them old days, like when I was mad that every episode of 24 was only an hour, because I got to know what happens next. So it's kind of good and bad. I get it, but
Yeah.
I do like the theory crafting, especially when you read the book and people's
Yeah.
theories are just so off. Like you should have heard some of the ones my wife had. There were some whoppers. Here's another one from Shelton. You've got a lot of fans of Dracula's. How was writing
Wow.
Dracula's with three others?
Wow. It was way easier than it had any right to be. I just love those guys, and you know, Paul Wilson is such an incredible. They're all great, but let's talk about Paul for a minute. He is. Have you read Repairman Jack and The Keep and all of his classics, Mike?
I have. I'm actually kind of low versed on horror outside of Stephen King. It's something I'm trying to correct right now.
Repairman Jack is incredible, and if you like it, it's a huge world he builds. What I love about what Paul does is because I don't go straight into fantasy. I shy away from like the sort of pure genre stuff. I love the hybrid mix of things, and he does that so well. And he was always a hero of mine. So it was probably it was the first time I'd written kind of with someone who was like, wow, that is just a fucking master of their craft. We'd all, you're all exchanging your pages and stuff and looking at them, and then Paul's would come in, and you're like, wow. But that's how you level up. You work with people who are better than you. And he definitely was. It will go down as probably the most pure joy I ever had writing something.
That's outstanding. Now here we. This one's actually kind of leapfrogged me a little bit, but I'm surprised we got this far into it. Look, I told you I'm running out of your books here. So, like Black Maestro, do we have any updates on your next book, and can I read it now? That's my question. Do I get any special privilege here? I would like. You need an alpha reader.
I would like to read the whole thing now. No, the not surprisingly, making Dark Matter was a all engrossing, encompassing experience on all facets of my life, including my day job, which is writing novels. But since we wrapped in last Thanksgiving, I've been working away on a book and pretty excited about it. Actually, I'm trying to go a little bit back to roots while still retaining the things that I love. That I do now.
Are we talking like desert places? Are we talking like run? What kind of back to the roots are we talking about here?
Yeah, just back to roots. I don't want to get just back to roots. Just back to roots. I've always I don't know. I've been writing the sci-fi stuff. I'm a horror novelist at heart. There's horror in everything that I do.
Especially in desert places. Good grief.
Yeah, maybe not that much. Not that much. That book would not be published today.
Reading your books kind of backwards, I've been like, man, he used to be in a darker place. I think.
A very dark place. I was in a very dark place. I grew up in the South. I grew up in the Bible Belt of North Carolina. Like, that's all you need to know.
I'm from Atlanta originally.
But no, I don't know. For me, finding a new thing to write about is all about like my enthusiasm for it, and am I like pushing myself in a different direction? I know it's weird to say something a little more back to roots, but that it does feel like a new direction for me in a lot of ways. And I believe if I am like thoroughly excited about it and jazzed about it, then I believe that my readers will feel that way. And if I don't feel that way about it, then I'll just put a book aside, go do something else, and keep searching for that idea that does, light my hair on fire.
So you're not running out of ideas, are you?
Oh, no. It's just, I don't want to, there's no point I just don't think there's a point in doing something just to do it. Like it has to feel like special and unique and different than what I've done before. And if it doesn't encompass those things, then I would rather not do it.
Well, something about adaptation that I've kind of noticed lately is I put out a video like, gosh, about a year ago. It was after my disappointment with Rings of Power and Wheel of Time, and it's saying like, why do we have all these shows that come out and they're like I think they're adapting a Robert McCammon book, Stinger, and they asked the gentleman doing the show, "What did you follow from the book basically?" And he was like, "We're not." And it's just like, okay, so George R. R. Martin came out with this comment recently about, poor book to screen adaptations. We actually even kind of chatted about this a little bit, and just saying like, you're not going to do it better than the person who wrote it. So why are you even showing any interest in doing that? I mean, how did that make you feel really? Because I look at something like Shogun, which is like one of the best adaptations I've ever seen.
Incredible.
It's just spectacular. And I look at something like House of Dragon, which they're doing as close as they can to when you're adapting basically a history book. And it's just like, that's so much more satisfying because you please not only the readers, but you please usually the casuals as well, because they remember why that story is really so good. So it seems like Apple seems to be one of those, it's letting authors get more involved with their products. And that's why I've been kind of really stumping for Apple lately, because they let Stephen King write Leafy's story, which I thought was amazing. They let him rewrite his own series. And I thought he fixed a lot of things I didn't like about the book. So it was even better that way. So I do feel like that's something that we're going to start heading towards, our authors getting more involved with adapting their works, even if they don't want to be a showrunner.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I have a lot of feelings about this one. What you said about that guy who's whoever it is that's adapting that McCammon thing, I'll tell you why why I think that they do it. They do it because some studio said that they'll make it and they need to make money. There's a true lack of respect for the source material that is rampant in Hollywood. And here's, I don't even know if it's a secret, but there are not a lot of great writers in Hollywood, like TV writers, feature writers. There just aren't. What it takes to write a novel, pure beginning, middle, and end, is a very honed skill set of understanding narrative and character. And I think it is very easy for quote unquote writers in LA to come in and think that they're above it somehow, that the source material is just something to leap off of, and then they're gonna make it good. And it's ego. It's ego. Like, I can't, like, just changing character names. I can't tell you how many times I've encountered like character names of important characters in novels changed for no identifiable reason. I mean, I know what the reason is. It's ego. It's not a secret that like LA breaks people, and that's why I don't live there. I have no desire to live there.
Good decision.
I don't know how people can consistently be creative and live in that town. You have to be separate and apart from it. And so like the scourge of bad adaptations is not going to like go away. But I don't know that necessarily the answer is all authors should suddenly become showrunners and run their show and run these shows, or like, I don't think that's the answer either. Cause it's a very like unique thing. I don't think most writers want to do it. It's just talking to people all day long and making a million decisions on the fly. And it's like, if you want to be a novelist, for the most part, you probably want to sit in a room by yourself and talk to imaginary characters and come up with crazy worlds. But I do think that the middle ground is in some ways the way I think George R. R. Martin was treated in Game of Thrones, which was with utmost respect. They looked to him as the father of that show. He wrote a lot of those episodes. He was clearly treated with the reverence that he deserved to be treated with as the creator of that world. And I think that is the model that should be embraced far more. Whether writers are writing scripts or running shows is a different thing, but it's this, oh, go away. You're an annoyance. Let the adults adapt your thing. That isn't the way great adaptations happen.
Yeah, I've said that for years as a Stephen King fan. I'm like, so this is one of the most successful authors of all time, but Joe Blow, screenwriter, thinks I can write it better than Stephen King. No, you can't. Stop. Stop it. Stop it, please. Before I forget, I wanted to bring this up. My wife had a very good question. She might have actually asked it in here somewhere. I saw her like in here in the comments somewhere. I just don't know if she's asked it yet. Like this was her saying that she liked the show, being able to digest it for a week. You brought up something in the show that I don't recall if it was in the book or not, since this takes place in Illinois. My wife is originally from Illinois, and I got to know if she wants to know if you ever spent any real time there, because she's like, how in the hell would anyone who is not from Illinois even know about Kankakee? And you wrote Kankakee, Illinois, that story.
Yeah.
That's where her family's from. So she was completely blown away by that.
No kidding. That's in the book. No, that was in the book.
Was it? Okay.
I spent a lot of time in Chicago, not throughout the rest of Illinois, but I spent a lot of time in Chicago over the years. I have a lot of very dear friends who lived there. And when I kind of came up with the idea for Dark Matter, I was in Chicago at this bar in Logan Square. And what I just finished was Wayward Pines, which was a very rural, mountain, forested environment. And I was the notion of this new plot, I just wanted it to be different. And I was like, Chicago's cool. And Chicago has this vibe. And I had spent enough nights in Chicago, months and months. I was like, I should set this book here. And it was just never even a question of once we were going to make the show that we would film there. There's a show I just watched that I really, really enjoyed. And it was set in Chicago. There's a bunch of beautiful drone shots of Chicago, but it was not set in Chicago. And boy, there is absolutely no replacement for being in the city, the environment where a story is set. You just can't replace it. It is an authenticity that cannot be faked. So we were really happy that Apple said, yeah, go shoot there. But no, Kankakee, I think I remember when I wrote that scene, I was looking for some quiet, like out of the way park, state park or something. And that came up, and yeah, that was where Jason 13, as we call him, was planning to do in Jason 2.
Oh man, I just went there with her for the first time last month, and yeah, there's a lot of cornfields. It's very, very small. It's something right out of a horror novel. Maybe I just read too much Stephen King, but yeah, cornrows they're kind of scary to me a little bit. This gentleman, Corey, says, Blake, I love the books. I've read yours. Do you have time to read stuff yourself? And if so, who are some of your favorite writers? Guys, this is where he tells me I'm a fool for not reading Robert Harris yet. So.
No, this is not that moment for you. Thanks, Corey. Who are some of my favorite writers? Wow. Knowing your crowd, I'll stick to kind of the Chicago does not equal Illinois.
That's my wife again.
Yeah. I love Andy Weir.
Oh yeah, I just got his Broken Binding editions. Yeah,
his what?
Broken Binding is they make special editions, and they put out Artemis, Project Hail Mary, and The Martian. They're beautiful. Yeah,
I think Andy's is incredible. I love Ted Chiang. Have you read his short fiction?
All I have read is The Martian and Project Hail Mary, and I want to read Artemis next. But I do like what I've read. Project Hail Mary was like my book of the year it came out.
No. Ted Chiang is a short story novelist.
I'm sorry.
Or a short story writer, novella writer. He wrote Arrival, or the story that Arrival was based on.
Oh, good. No, I loved Arrival. Okay, the movie.
He has two collections, Stories of Your Life and Exhalation. And that's like, he writes like a short story every 3 years, and it's perfect. It's just absolutely perfect. I love him. I love ℙ𝕦𝕤𝕚𝕤𝕤. He did A Gentleman in Moscow. Like my early fantasy stuff was like C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien and, Wrinkle in Time. I read
out of the womb reading those. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And it all just formed this weird hybrid of, like, writers are just all, the books that they've read. That's what writers are built out of. And I read super eclectively Thomas Harris and like the horror of Silence of the Lambs and all these things. And it's, when I look back, it makes sense, like why I write the stuff I write now. But I just love reading across all genres and looking for, like, the commonality is like do I just inhale it? Does it make me stop working and doing other things? That's the only real common thing in my reading tastes.
Okay. All right. Someone asked earlier, and I can't seem to find it now. Here we go. How did you guys come up with some of the worlds that weren't in the books? Because there was several where I was like, okay, I remember this. I remember this. I obviously like the Murder Hornets were a nice new addition. That was like, oh, let's make this scarier than it actually was. But like the apocalyptic world, the one where, where there was the disease going on and stuff. I thought those were really good. But yeah, there was some that were added. The Utopia world was beautiful. I thought that was magnificent to look at. And it's like Apple's aesthetic is just amazing. All their sci-fi stuff is just beautiful on their service. And that was definitely no difference.
I had a number of worlds that I didn't put in the book because what I found during the process of writing the book was that, like, the multiverse sounds like amazing. You just want to write tomes and tomes of pages about it, but you actually have to keep the characters moving, and so I couldn't put every world I wanted to in. One of them, so like my favorite, honestly, we called it No Atmosphere World, and it's the world in episode 4 where Jason opens the door and suddenly they're like blown back and the camera like shoots out of the box and goes up to this building that looks kind of like the Eye of Sauron. We worked with our physicists. We were like, what if there was a world where there was a super intense solar flare that just burned off the entire atmosphere, and the surface of Earth was essentially like space, like no pressure, nothing. And so we talked a lot about that and how to build into that. I loved that world. And we also had this sequence which was so much fun in 4 where we had all these world ideas, but we didn't want to we didn't want the show to ever feel episodic. Like, all love and respect to Star Trek, we're just not making like a Star Trek type show. It's like we're not living in this world, this episode, another world the next. So we said, let's do this sequence where they just open a bunch of doors in the quick succession, and we just play around with everyone's favorite worlds. Like there was one in the book that I never got to do, where you open a door and it's like the box has been buried. It's like you're underground. I loved that. And a lot of just suggestive worlds. And there's even a nod to Wayward Pines in one of those worlds.
I'm trying to think of what it was. Was it a street sign?
No.
And what was that? Because I want to say that I remember shouting it out when we were watching it. She's like, what are you talking about? But
there's a door he opens, and it's very foggy, misty, spiky treed forest. In the distance, you see these creatures kind of moving.
Oh, okay. All right. No, then I didn't catch that, but that's cool. That's really awesome. That'd be fun. That'd be fun to throw that in there. Now, before I get to this question, I gotta kind of set this up and have you be like, oh boy, and then bring it back. I am not a fan of when they make a book or a show and it's very successful, and then they say, you know what, this was fully adapted, but now we're going to do our own thing. I'm not really wild about that. Like, they're talking about doing that with Shogun, and I'm not wild about it. I'm like, you got 5 of the books in the Asian saga. Why don't we do one of those? You can make it an anthology if you really want to bring Sonata back that bad. You don't have to do this, because I do not think James Clavell would approve of this. However, since it would be you writing it, are we correct as viewers in assuming that you were setting up a season 2 of Dark Matter? And can you say anything if it's up?
Yeah.
Once, yes.
So we lived for 2 years with all these characters and really built them out, especially when actors get involved. You're talking with them and the point of views that they bring to the story and to the characters are so meaningful and expansive. I think by the end of Dark Matter, our thinking was this: there are for sure storylines that could continue.
Yeah,
absolutely. But at the same time, we didn't want to leave anything. We left it all on the field. There's nothing that was held back from the book. We're like, oh, if we do a season 2, if we get a season 2, we'll do this. Then we were like, we're going to put everything on the screen. But there were so many cool things that happened as we were filming, and it was and it's similar to a lot of my books. I think a lot of my books, there could be sequels to them. There could have been a sequel to Dark Matter, the book. It just wasn't, because the way my mind works is when it comes to novels, I want to do like a pure creation thing. Wayward Pines was the trilogy and one of the only things I've done that had multiple books in it, because the first book is so different from the rest of it, and each book is a truly different experience. So this is all a very long-winded way of saying we wanted to leave the door open, and at the same time, with the open-ended way that a lot of my books end, like Recursion ends very open-ended, Upgrade ends very open-ended. I like that. I like passing the baton off to the reader on the last page and saying the story continues. Maybe not me telling it, but it continues in your mind. So we were definitely trying to do that with Dark Matter. However, there are definitely stories that could be told, and time will tell. We're just sort of processing the experience of other people watching this show that we worked on, and this story I've been living with for literally 10 years now. And it's a lot to process, and it's a lot to think about. And is this something that we want to continue? Is this something Apple wants to continue? Is this something fans want to see more of? I can say that if we do continue it, it will be because we feel like there's truly amazing things left to say, that we've only scratched the surface of talking about the human experience in this fucked up reality we all live in.
Well, I did a video not that long ago about like books that don't have a sequel, but I wish they did. And Dark Matter was the one for me. So if that's the way I have to get it. Yeah. So, well, yeah, definitely. I mean, Pines maybe, but I feel like Pines had a good enough ending that I'm like, okay, I feel like if, that's like Tony Stark coming back to the MCU. It's like, well, that kind of takes away that satisfying ending, that we have with Tony. So it's like with that one, but I do feel like as open-ended, because I felt like Dark Matter could have been like Quantum Leap. You could have been every door was a new episode each week. There's new reality every single week. Because my wife here is saying, I would love to see Leighton and Ryan's experience in Bond. Like, I feel like both of those do have a trap door, I think you would call them, where if you can say it ended, hell, you could even also say, hey, maybe Amanda just wasn't satisfied with her Utopia ending. There's lots of openings I could see there. So I'm
also,
sure you got
when you have multiple characters of the same, when you have multiple versions of the same character, there are so many different but valid like interpretations of what their life might be, and it's almost an unlimited, and that's the challenge. It's an almost unlimited possibility of where it could go.
All right. That's the best non-answer I've ever heard. And the thing was, I was going to ask is, with the success of this, if Apple's really happy, like Black Maestro here, there any chance they'd be interested in doing Recursion? Because I think that's the one that is primed the most for television, man. That would
just
be
ask me all the questions I can't answer right now. I'm so sorry.
So is there interest in people? Are people interested in Recursion? I guess let's say that.
You're gonna get me in trouble here, Mike.
You won't be watching this. Don't worry.
This is just what I'll say. I sold Recursion to Netflix 6 years ago. 6 years ago,
and it hasn't lapsed yet.
With Shonda Rhimes adapting, and Matt Reeves.
Nice.
Involved.
It's Batman. Okay.
Yeah. It's been 6 years. That's all I'll say.
So it's in production hell is what I'll call it. I know that some of these, like I talked to Joe Abercrombie, he's basically saying that like someone bought the rights to his product and he can't really talk about it until those rights wear out.
It's a tricky thing, and I know, like I just don't like to generally talk about stuff unless it's real. Like I'll announce something when it's if it's sold, and because those things come out, and when it like goes into production, but things so rarely go into production. I see a lot of writers, they like literally sell an option and it's like blasted across the interwebs, and it's like great, it's awesome, but until it's like a real thing, it's not real. But I will say this: Recursion is, to me, like it's kind of the crown jewel of my catalog, especially that hasn't been made into something. I would love to make it. I would love to make it. I think it was too daunting at the time. That's why I sold the rights after I finished the book. The book broke my brain to write it. Like I was not
It broke
right
my
for
brain reading it in a good way. It's like
I
I
was not
understand what he's
right for
talking about, but oh my god, just like this concept, yeah.
yeah, I wasn't right for like 6 months after that book. And I thought, I can't imagine doing this. I just can't imagine doing this. It's too complicated. But you know, that's the advantage of time and like living and doing things and trying new things. Now on the other side of dark matter, which was at some point, I can't, I don't, I still am surprised that we that we did that. Now it doesn't. I see like, oh, I think I know how to do this. But some things have to happen first. So
Okay. All right. Yes, I think that there was some interest in upgrade out there somewhere.
yeah.
So I mean, if you, and again, this is just wish casting here. Say you could adapt any of your other books. Are there any that you think you would have a good time adapting them? Is there any you really say? Because I think Run could be a lot of fun and kind of like that Purge kind of
Mhm.
way. And Desert Places, I'm going to say Desert Places should be the setting for the next season of True Detective on HBO, because that's what I got when I was reading. I was like, this is something messed up like they would see on HBO, like True Detective or something. And they've been struggling for a good season since season 1, in my opinion. So hey, they could use the good content. But
That's
those are two I
interesting. You think
think.
Desert Places should be like a True Detective thing?
I think so. Yeah,
That's
yeah. I love the Andrew
fascinating.
D. Thomas, Luther Kite. That was fun.
Wow. It's weird. I mean, it was my first novel. I started writing that novel when I was 19 years old. It was not my first. I wrote my first novel was this terrible family saga, 200,000 word thing, and I thought maybe I should try to write something that I would actually want to read. And then Desert Places came out, or came to me, and I like can't bring myself to go back and read it. Like I don't want to not have it out there because I don't believe in going back in time and sort of sanitizing my work, if that makes sense. It's like
Sure.
I think that's I'm proud of it. It's the book that launched my career. I wouldn't write it now, but I am proud of it, and I won't read it now because I'm terrified of what it is. Um,
Not that's comparable, but it's like when I go back and watch my videos from 2019, I'm like, oh my Lord. I won't delete them, but I don't want to see them. Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean it's like that's who I was at that point in time.
Mhm.
And I do think the book has like legit merit. I really think it does. I just think it's super, super messed up. And I don't know why I wrote that when I was 19 years old. But
I think we're more will. It's like Steven Spielberg when he talked about doing Close Encounters of the Third Kind, saying that when he wrote it, he could have the guy get on the ship and leave his family behind. But he's saying he couldn't have done that now. He couldn't have wrote
yeah,
that now. So
Mm.
say you're
yeah,
it's like I say, and going back and rereading all these Stephen King stories, I'm like, when I was a teenager, I just wanted to be scared. Now I'm reading them as an adult and seeing like he has something for everybody in these books, and it's a different experience reading them
yeah,
as an adult. So I think that
yeah.
probably would definitely go into the way that you write too.
Oh yeah, and there's a meanness to that book, and it is unflinching, and it was like it it wasn't trying to be like we just live in a very different time.
Mhm.
That was 25 years ago. God, 25 years ago. We just live in such a different time, and we have we're so much more interconnected now. We have such an awareness of like not offending people, not taking things too far, and like there was none of that. There was literally no holds barred in that read.
It was the Wild West, yeah.
It was the Wild West, and I think there is a purity to it. I don't know if I don't know if I would ever give anyone the adaptation rights. I tried to write the screenplay for it way back when, but it's I don't know.
Has your phone been ringing a little more since Dark Matter? Maybe has
Yeah,
your agent been letting you know some things. Yeah, there's been some
yeah,
more interest out there. That's got to feel great. I mean, you've got so many on the backlog here, like Abandon. I think could probably be, and some of these don't all have to be TV shows. I think some of these could be because you do write really good thrillers. I think some could be good 2-hour movies or even as a
mm,
streaming movie or like a limited series or something like that. I think that's some options out there. So with all the the rush for content that there is because of all the streaming services right now. I gotta think your phone's
Well,
ringing.
I mean, my my one that you haven't read, my novel Famous it looks like it's going into production this
That's next. Okay, I
in
got
Nov
that one
in,
next.
in November. Zac Efron playing the lead, the
Okay.
leads, and Jody Hill directing. And it's so weird that because that was the book I wrote after Desert Places. I wrote it in 2002. It's a book that's set in predominantly in New York and LA, two cities at that point in time. I'd never been to Los Angeles. I've been to New York City one time, but it's so odd that people are now connecting to that book. And it's going to be published next year. And I'm doing literally same thing I did with Run. I'm doing a very light polish over these books. Not like I'm not I go through scenes and I'm like, I know I would do this differently now, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to betray like the Blake of that time and completely rewrite him. It's just like if there's something obvious that's like, no, let's just tweak this sentence or tweak this.
You don't
But
want to
it would
George
be,
Lucas it and just completely
yeah,
change
exactly. I don't want
everything.
to go back and revisionist history what I wrote. I want people to experience it, and it's not like a big new book release. It won't be a giant splashy thing, but I like that it will be like this book and Run will be available in part of my catalog and in actual bookstores for the first time.
Yeah, I was running out of your book, so I started slowing down. I did Snowbound late last year, and I'm going to be doing Famous before the end of this year, and then that's when I'm going to just be like, so, how's that new book coming along? Speaking of the changing thing here, this is a good question from Liz. Have you ever written a book with a certain ending in mind, but during the writing process completely changed your mind on how it needed to end? So do you have an end in mind when you start writing, or do you let it come to you?
I wish I knew what my endings were when I almost never know what my
Okay.
endings are when I start a book. I'm trying to think if I've ever known. I don't know that I've ever known what the ending would be when I've started a book. But what happens is I will get usually my midpoints. What I write between page 1 and let's say 150, it changes, but not materially. After the midpoint, I almost inevitably throw the last half of a book away and redo it. Not completely, but like it changes so much because it's this weird thing that writers you sort of see the end zone in the distance and you can start like speeding up and you just kind of want to get across the finish line and say, okay, I've finished the first draft. And I've had a tendency in the past to do that, but not in the most satisfying way. So with Upgrade, with Recursion especially, there were like massive rewrites after the midpoint because I think that there are so few books that for me end in a truly satisfying manner that you feel like all the stakes are really resolved, that the ending feels right, surprising, inevitable, but also you couldn't really see it coming. I just think that it's really hard to do. I think it's the hardest thing. And so I wish I could see an end before I had even begun, but my failing is I have to throw a lot of pages out to get to the good stuff.
Well, I guess we're our own toughest critics on things like that. So if
Yeah.
I felt like, I mean, I couldn't. I'm like I'm the worst D&D player ever because I can't. That's why I read, guys. Because everything I would write would just be me spoofing Lord of the Rings and Dune a million times over and over again. You know, and some people made a good career out of that, but that's just not my style or whatever. So I couldn't imagine because I would set on an ending and then I would feel like I was locked. Like I couldn't let my story evolve if I did that. So, and this is an interesting one about covers. How involved are authors in selecting a book cover? I love the covers for Dark Matter and Recursion. And now you got those tie-in editions with Joel and Jennifer on the front. That's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for all authors. I know in the beginning of my career, they were like, here's the cover. We love it.
Now you got some stroke. You can say,
I got some shit covers out of that one, man. Look at Snowbound's hardcover cover, man. That's like, sorry, that's some phoned in bullshit. But as you get a little bit more clout, you can, people are the more you sell, the more people take you seriously, the more you're invited into these conversations. So yeah, covers are really, really hard and real. I mean, I've been very involved in all of my covers since Wayward Pines.
Yeah, those
And my
got nice
covers, yeah.
re-releases, didn't they? With some matching covers now. Those got re-released because the ones I got are like gone now.
Yeah. Well, and the hard thing about my covers for my hardcover releases is that it's this really cool minimalism. It's like it's not a lot of imagery and stuff. It's literally just about the font treatment and the slightest little bit of ephemera to help support the idea. So those are hard. Those are really hard to get across the line because it's really easy for them just to be boring. Yeah, covers are like nothing is more nerve wracking than trying to like land on the cover.
What about audio? Do you have any feedback in those? Like,
Yeah,
even if it's just like,
I just listened to a whole raft of narrators for Run for the new edition of Run. They're asking me who I liked and what, and so you list they send you samples of what they've read before, and you want to hear like if it's a male, you want to hear how they read females.
yeah,
For me, when I'm listening to audio, like it just kills the whole thing if like you could be the best narrator in the world, but this guy, like every time he reads a female character, if I just cringe, it just ruins the read for me. And vice versa. So finding that perfect voice that carries it's tricky. And I usually, listen to between 6 or 8, all total pros and great at what they do. But you're listening for something that just feels like this person is the right. It's the right tone for the book.
I've got too much listening ADD to really do audiobooks, but I've heard that complaint. Kate Redding, I think it's believe it or not, does Wheel of Time. Everyone just says they want to throw the headphones across the room when she's doing her male voice. It's just so bad. I mean, it just sounds like it would be funny to me, but
accents. Oh man, accents.
So final question from me, really. If anybody else wants to get a question in the comments, I do so now. For me is, since I always compare Blake Crouch, or I'm sorry, compare Blake Crouch to Michael Crichton. Sorry, I compare you to Blake Crouch. Can you believe this? For me, I got to know, besides Jurassic Park, because that's the easy answer, what is your personal favorite Michael Crichton?
Wow. That's a hard one. I think Sphere.
Yeah, that's probably
really, I think Sphere is really special.
I think Sphere melted my brain when I was in high school. I could not comprehend. And then Timeline came out right after that. I was like, oh my God.
You shouldn't have said Timeline.
Yeah.
Quantum Foam.
Yeah.
I mean,
guy was a wizard, man. He was a wizard.
He was a wizard. And I don't know. I mean, even read his, I was reading Micro recently. Not his best. Not amazing. But
I'm still of the mind that any of the stuff they're saying they're found, I don't believe it. I think his estate is just yeah, we'll take a check. I don't know.
If you want to call my estate lawyer and make sure that shit doesn't happen to me.
Yeah,
I guess it doesn't matter if I'm
at this point. It's been like 15 years, and even Tupac thinks this is getting ridiculous now. It's stuff that just keeps coming out after you've died. But Sphere's amazing. But
didn't James Patterson just write a book with Michael Crichton?
Yeah, that's a neat trick, huh? He must have found that time machine that he used for Timeline.
It's almost a Michael Crichton plot within itself.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I always come back to that comparison, but something I'll say that I appreciate about your books that maybe Crichton didn't do as much is you always seem to put a focus on family. And that's something with a wife and 2 young kids. That's something I really do value that you put in your stories, because I feel like at the end, it's like, yes, it's the techno thriller. Yes, it's some kind of technological advancement that maybe we shouldn't be playing with. But in the end, it's like family trumps everything. So I'm glad that you always put that message.
Thank you. I feel the same. It's those are the most important elements, honestly, of the books, because the rest of it, the sleek concept that only really gets you so far. You can go on Netflix and scroll down to row 8,000 of the movies available and find a million things with cool concepts. If you can make people care about the characters, that's the whole game. If you care about the characters, it doesn't really matter what genre it is. It just doesn't. I have to ask you a question, because I'm afraid to watch the new season of House of Dragons. Should I be afraid?
I mean, I was quite happy. There was some people that were upset because it does do this thing where it builds up this. It's kind of like the complaints you heard about the end of Shogun. Is people who hadn't read the book was they're like, okay, it makes this huge build this battle, and you don't get that battle. Same thing with House of Dragon, except Shogun was never meant to be like that. Shogun was a stranger in a strange land. It was very much a character study. It wasn't about the battle. But with House of Dragon, they are building up this huge event. You don't get it. You got to wait till next year. And I think that's got a lot of people flipping tables and saying, "Oh, this is like Game of Thrones season 80." It's not. It's not. It's still great. And as someone who loves Fire and Blood, it's good. It's made a couple of changes, but a lot of them I think I'm actually in favor of.
Wow.
I'm not one of those people who's like, it has to be word for word from the page. Some things I understand don't work on the screen, but those big moments are all there, and I think they're awesome. But
all right,
I do think the highs of season 1 were probably a little higher. But I don't see how you can be upset with season 2, except with the fact that if you understand, you got to wait till season 3 for that big battle that they're kind of angling towards.
By the way, the OG series did the same thing too.
Yeah.
Like I think everyone got spoiled.
I think people have gotten spoiled on like MCU movies or something because Game of Thrones was never this nonstop action show, guys. It was about the political maneuver. Like, I need to see less of people just like sitting at tables talking. I'm like, well, I got to tell you about the Song of Ice and Fire books. I mean, that's most of it.
The first 2 seasons are quiet for the most. It doesn't actually ramp up until 3 and 4 in the original series. That's when it gets nuts.
Yeah, which remarkably was adapting the best book in that series, A Storm of Swords. It's weird how that works.
It's a miracle.
It's great source material. That's how it works.
It's I think it's the best series, the best adaptations ever been done. I'm literally watching it with my 15-year-old daughter.
Oh, that's awesome. He's my kid's kind of got interested in the dragons and stuff, but I'm not. I've got I let him watch R-rated movies and stuff like that. Like he still thinks that he's the only kid that goes to school, and when they're all talking about like the best Pixar movie, and he's like, actually, Terminator 2 is the greatest movie of all time. You know, that's my kid. You know,
but, I mean, it's a solid.
It's a great pick, right? Yeah,
good kid. It's a good pick. It's a good pick. I don't know. It holds up so well. It holds up.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I just mean Game of Thrones.
Oh yes,
the original. I think the VFX is in some ways better than the new stuff. It's just, I don't understand.
I'll say that when I'm watching Jurassic Park, the first Jurassic Park, it's like, this looks better than all the Jurassic World movies. It's amazing. But I mean, it's almost like Spielberg's magic or something like that.
Yeah.
But well, I'll let them watch like R-rated movies and stuff, but I'm not ready for all the, whoring and stuff like that. I don't want to make him uncomfortable, make me. I was like, I don't think my parents would have watched something like that with me. But, when he's ready, because he loves Lord of the Rings, so I think that when he gets there, he'll be ready. It's just I think right now it would embarrass him too much. I think
it's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's worth it to get to season 3 though.
So what are you watching right now? Before I let you go here,
so going through, we just literally watched Spoils of War last night from episode or season 7, which I think is one of the best episodes of the whole thing.
Spoils of War. I'm not familiar. What service is this on?
No. Literally the episode Spoils of War of season 7 of Game of Thrones. When they intercept the treasury, going to the Iron Bank. Sorry, spoiler alert.
At this point, guys, if you don't know, I can't help you.
I'm gonna tell you a show that we're all obsessed with.
What's that?
It is our absolute obsession. It's called From.
Oh, I love the first 2. I told my wife, you've got to watch it so we can do episode 3 or season 3, so we can do episodes for it.
Incredible.
It's the best. It's doing the Lost formula.
It's doing the Lost. By the way, they have lost people involved in it.
Yeah. They claim they have an ending in mind this time, though.
God, I hope so. God, have you seen the end? Did you watch the end of season 2?
Yeah. And that was that. That was how long do I got to wait?
They did a Lost thing. When we
flash forward.
He's like, oh, we have to go back. Yeah, it was so good. It's so good. We're obsessed with that. Watching A Gentleman in Moscow, which is cool. Just watched the first episode last night. That was like really well done. I love that book so much. So I went in a little bit like ready to be grumpy.
I'm watching 12 Monkeys, the TV series.
I haven't tried that yet.
That's actually fun if you like time travel, which I know that you do. I think that would be something you could probably check out if you're bored. If you're like me, you've got a backlog of books almost as long as the backlog of TV shows you got to watch. So
I mean, our reading lists or the demands of our reading lists are probably not that different. I'm sure.
Right.
How do you even pick how do you pick what to read next?
I
I don't
tell
even know
people all the
that.
time, I will never have time to read all this stuff behind me. And this is what people making, when you run a channel like this, you get nothing but great recommendations all the time, you know. So
I'm
that's
sure you
what I do
get
with your books, you
yeah,
know. So
you
what
get bombarded with ARCs from publishers, I'm sure now, and like you get
I
every
do.
book that's published that's fantasy or sci-fi, you're getting it.
No, it's actually something that I don't really understand. It's become such a hassle, and I've noticed. I've talked to a lot of authors that are as frustrated with it as reviewers are. Is that it's you can't consistently get you know review copies. It's like
Hmm.
such a like I Pierce Brown told me that he feels like I probably sold more of his books than like his publisher had
Wow.
because I talk about a series so much. And I couldn't even get an arc of his new series. He had to
What?
personally send me one of his actual final drafts for me to read because the publisher wouldn't send me one.
I mean, I could probably make it so you get more books than you will ever be able to read. Say the word.
Yeah, Christopher Rocchio, he was the editor over at Bain, and now they send me just a box of books every single
Yeah,
month, and I'm like, my God, I'll never be able to read this stuff. But yeah,
I love that. Last question for you, for me, as someone who doesn't naturally gravitate to fantasy, hit me with a rec that's like my thing with fantasy is I need pace in my books. I need pace. And I feel like, I mean, fantasy literally is just not about that. It has its
yeah.
moments, but it's about the world building, the characters. Is there a fantasy series? Is there a book that actually has that?
So it's like a little more streamlined, a little more to the point.
Mhm.
I mean, it kind of depends on what kind you're looking for. Like if you're wanting like the prophecies and the dragons and the magic and stuff, I don't really have one because all those are really, really in depth about how the world and how the sausage is made
Mhm.
or whatever. I always recommend the First Law by Joe Abercrombie because it's just I always say it's like if you imagine a Song of Ice and Fire, but without dragons, without magic, without the prophecy stuff. It's
Hmm.
just that world that's punishing, and the characters are very morally gray, and it's mostly dialogue, and the dialogue is like S tier, just like amazing stuff, just like ridiculous. And it's 3 books. Like the trilogy, the original trilogy, First Law, is shorter than the Lord of the Rings. I
Hmm.
mean,
Wow.
it's you can really get through it really quick, and it is a very quick read. It has some of the most memorable characters ever. And I'll say that's probably my second favorite, probably third favorite. Song of Ice and Fire and Lord of the Rings are my favorite, but I say
Mhm.
third, the First Law by Joe Abercrombie would be one
All
I
right.
think you
Done.
probably
I'll
probably
throw it
bump
on
up.
the, I'll add it to the, I'll add it to the stack.
I think you would enjoy it. Well, man, I appreciate you taking time to do this. What advice would you give to anyone that's an author that's looking to have their work adapted? What advice would you give them? Should they be showrunners? Should they write their own screenplays if they have that option? Or should they just run away and hide, just take the money and run?
Jeez. I mean, that's a really hard question to just, there's not an easy answer to that. It's more about, it's more about the people that you choose to be in business with. It doesn't, whether you're like, whether you want to actually become a showrunner or write a script, any of that stuff, that's a long answer. But the best thing you can do is work with good people. And there's not a lot of good people to work with.
Mhm.
There's a lot of posers and a lot of people who wouldn't know a good story. Who they just chase heat. They don't chase quality.
I'm glad to hear you say that because I always assumed that this was what was going on. So, someone who's actually been there and seen some of it, I'm glad that you're saying
Yeah,
this.
but they're good and great people in that business. They're just like it's like all things. It's the sliver. And it's about finding those people and not being swept away because someone bats eyes at your book. Like you have to ask yourself the hard questions. That is this a person who you believe can actually get it over the line and get it made, which is really the only thing that matters. If you just want an option on something to feel good about your book, then take an option. But if your goal is to get something made and get it made well, then it's incredibly important which partners you choose to be in business with. Um, and that starts with the right representation, but also just a good bullshit detector.
All right, man. Well, hey, I look forward to the next book, and I hope you're going to let me know when you can tell me a little more because I'm
Of
excited to know
course.
what kind of direction you're headed in. Because
Of
like I said,
course.
I'm doing famous, and then I'm almost out here. I'm almost out, so
Well,
can't let that
famous
happen.
is gonna be weird. It's gonna be a weird one for you. Famous is gonna be
You know,
weird.
every time I pick up one of your older books, you're like, I don't know how I feel about that. So, I think you might not like reflecting on your own material sometimes.
It's
Isn't
just
that?
different. It's got such a different voice to it. I I've come to really love it, and I sort of distrusted it intensely because I wrote it 22 years ago when I didn't know what I was doing at all. But there's something about it that there's a voice in there that I think is actually really special. It's just it's nothing like it is the outlier of all of my books, of all of my stories. It is the most outlier, not even close.
Well, don't read the Goodreads reviews of Run. Run was good. Those people can shut up. I will die on that hill. I thought Run was, I read it in one day, man. Run was so good. I loved it. So.
Well, congrats on the channel, dude. It's you're crushing it. And
oh, thank you. And thanks for coming back. I didn't chase you off the first time. It was last. So hopefully a third time it will be when we're talking about your new book. I hope we can do that again. That would be really, really fun.
Man, I hope that's not too long from now. I need to get on that.
Yeah, I'm going to stop bothering you now so you can go write. All right. Thank you guys for joining us, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.